Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Aislinn.
Hi, so happy to be here.
I'm so excited. I read your title, read your synopsis, and I was like, yes, this is the book for me. So I can't wait to dive in. Today we have Aislinn Brophy with us. She writes YA, most like fantasy with a little extras in there. So I can't wait to hear all about your extra. Your new release is Spells to Forget Us, correct?
Yes.
And your first book is How to Succeed at Witchcraft. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with your beginning story, or do you want to jump in with a new book?
I'm ready to jump in with a new book. I'm excited.
Okay, fun. So Spells to Forget Us, set the tone, because I won't give too much away. I'll just let you talk.
Okay, so I'll just do a little pitch for what the book is. So it's about a world in which magic is secret. You have magical people living alongside non-magical people in secret. As a result of they've set up all of these misdirection spells so that non-magical people cannot notice the magic happening around them. And a witch and a non-magical girl fall for each other. But in this world, because magic is secret, the witch is required to cast a spell on the non-magical girl so that she could actually tell her about magic. And she casts this spell so that if they ever broke up, the spell would erase the non-magical girl's memory of both magic and having ever dated this witch or known her. So they do this, but this memory spell goes wrong, and then they end up trapped in this cycle of meet cutes and breakups, because they do break up. And then instead of just the non-magical girl forgetting about the other girl, the witch also forgets her. So they keep meeting each other and falling for each other because they don't remember that they once dated.
Well, a little bit like Groundhog Day then.
Yes.
And so I did not get that from the blurb of the book. I got that, well, I got part of it, I guess. I got that they were both forgetting and then re-meeting and re-falling in love. And I thought, okay, hopefully they get out of this. We won't do a spoiler alert on the happily ever after. So are we set in present day, or are we set future or past?
Yes, this is and I do mostly contemporary fantasies so far. So this one is set in the city of Boston. So it's like very contemporary. I did a lot of dates and a lot of calendars open, because it is, I think right now is when the beginning of the book would be happening. So it's happening in 2024.
Very cool. I love those. So very urban fantasy setting then.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And how old are your characters? Is this a YA book, or is this new adult?
Young adult. My one of the witch is 18 years old, and then the other character is 17. So
okay.
they're just, yeah,
right on the cusp there.
Right on the cusp, right in that point, that sweet spot of being like, I'm starting to be an adult, but I still live with my parents.
And is it PG-13 then, or is it a little bit more adult in content?
I'd say pretty PG-13 is where I would put it. Yeah.
And it's described as a time travel book as well. How does that element play in?
I wouldn't say it's exactly a time travel book per se. It's more like they're trapped in a loop because they don't remember anything that's happened to them in the past. So that's where more the sort of like that's why it's being compared to a time loop book, because they do kind of keep reliving very similar things, because they keep meeting each other and they're the same people each time. So they keep meeting each other and having very similar conversations.
Interesting. So, but time is progressing forward normally. Nothing odd has happened. It just feels they're just repeating the same thing and they don't know they're repeating the same thing. So what about their friends and family? Do their friends and family realize, or are their friends and family forgetting? Or this seems like very complicated to me.
Yes, I had to do so much work to make all of this make sense. Yes, their friends and family do think that they're being minorly strange. However, I will say that both of them, because this is very star-crossed lovers, and both of them have somewhat complicated family situations. So they wouldn't necessarily be telling their families that they were even in a relationship. So
Okay.
that's part of how this works in this book, that people think they're being strange, but not as strange as if they were really telling everybody everything about themselves.
Okay, that makes total sense, because when I was 17 or 18, I did not tell my parents anything. So yeah, I have to remember back that far. Fun. And are there a lot of secondary characters that we get to meet?
Yes, I think that this is one of the books that I feel like I have some of my favorite secondary characters. I the witch, her name is Luna. She has a sort of brother character. He's actually her cousin, but they live in the same house. They're very close. And he's one of my favorite characters. His name is James. And they have a sort of interesting relationship because they have a very politically important witch family, and she is set to be the heir, and he is a better personality fit for being the heir because he actually wants to do political things, but he's very magically weak. And so he's not really eligible for that. So they have kind of a little bit of a chafe in their relationship because of that, because their families are like constantly pushing her to be doing things that she doesn't want to do. And she's very aware that he would be better at them and wants to do them himself, but can't. So he's one of my favorites. And I don't know, there's a kind of a medium assortment of other colorful witch characters that are around magical Boston. I was really excited about having a light political element in this, even though it's much more like interpersonal politics and not like taxes and tariffs. It's much more like, oh, our family hates your family, and so we're scheming against you.
Yeah, I like exploring those themes in fantasy because I feel like it's a really safe place to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Some people say it doesn't work, but I like it. So, but it sounds like even though this is an urban contemporary setting, you got to do a lot of world building. It's building the magical system, building the rules of the magic. And would you categorize this as more of a fantasy or more a romance? I mean, romantasy is such the catchword right now.
I would say it has a pretty strong fantasy element to it. I wouldn't say that this is an incredibly like soft magic system per se. I do have a lot of world building that's in there. And the world was very important to me in writing it. I think that was one of the things with editing where I was like, the things I was really excited about at the time, I love the romance, but I also was like, ooh, all these families and the things that they get to do and their kinds of magic. And my editor had to be like, what we all care about is this relationship. And I was like, okay, you're right. We'll go back to that. I guess we don't get to go to a long council meeting every 3 chapters. So I think that this was a fun balancing act in terms of, which is always true with like romance and fantasy, and like having love stories in fantasy is you're always trying to figure out how you want to thread the needle and how much romance there is and how much fantasy there is. But I will say for my fantasy lovers, there's a pretty fair amount of fantasy and like world building and magic in this one.
Fun. Yeah, my last book, I sent it to my editor. She sent it back. She was like, fix the first 10 chapters. You have way too much world. I'm like, but it was really good, really good. And she was like, no, something exciting needs to happen. I was like, okay, something exciting.
Yep, relatable. I'm like, don't you want to know all of the stuff I wrote down?
I'm thinking it in my head. And she's like, well, just throw in some action in between all this stuff. I'm like, okay.
Yep, fantasy. Sometimes I'm like, I think it would be so nice to just write like a really actually contemporary book where they just like go to school or something. And I'm like, I don't have to spend any time explaining how like taking the bus works or if they're just going to regular school. Like, this seems so efficient. No wonder the books are shorter.
So they are going to a special magic school in the book?
Yes, my two main characters, obviously one of them is not magical. So she goes to a real school that is a real school around here that I frankly walk past all the time. Um, and then the witch goes to a school that most people who are magical children in town go to. And I love a magical school. It's hard to set a ton of chapters in class or like at the magical school when fully one of your characters doesn't go there and isn't involved with it. But I tried to pepper in some fun magical school scenes as well so that people could get a sense of what that life was like.
Right. Neat. And is it invisible to everyone else, or everybody thinks it's a normal school and they just see people coming and going, doesn't know what happens behind the closed doors?
Yeah, everyone thinks it's a normal school. It's one of those things where, I think if you just walk past buildings all the time, you don't necessarily think about what they are. And the spells that they have set up on them are very like misdirection oriented. So it's like, oh, that's a school. And then you just keep walking and never think about it more.
Never think about it again. And is this written from first person, third person? What
It's
point of views do we get? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, it's first person. I have this is my first book with two perspectives. I was really
Okay.
excited about that. I thought it was very fun. Yeah, so we get both Luna and Aoife's perspective in the book. So Luna is my witch character, and then Aoife is the non-magical girl. So I think that I had a lot of fun with that. Because I think I'm a big romance reader, and it's one of my favorite things is getting like two perspectives on romance specifically, because it means that you just have so much of an eye on another person, another like from someone else's point of view. And I love when they're like right about the other person, and I love when they're wrong about the other person. And just especially two characters who are really obsessed with each other, spending all this time trying to like analyze what this other girl is thinking or like how she's acting. And then also it gives you a window into things that you're if from a first person perspective that a character might not notice about themselves, but the person that they're dating is noticing that they are very strange about this particular topic, or they always clam up when this comes up, and things like that. So I had a lot of fun with this. I thought it was going to be hard, and then it was hard for just figuring out what chapters should be told from what perspectives and trying to like balance who had the narrative thread at any given time. But I had a lot of fun with writing 2 points of view.
Well, it seems like it would create a lot of suspense too, because you're like, no, wait, don't do that. They're gonna react this way, or no, they think this. And especially as they're meeting each other over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think I had a lot of fun writing characters who are very insecure in this book, because I think that it's interesting to have a character who's very insecure about something in particular, and then their love interest is not bothered by that thing at all. My witch is very self-conscious about some things, is like kind of secretive, and this is where I was kind of a little inspired, very silly, by Twilight, where I was like, oh, my Edward Cullen type character who's like, I'm bad, like you shouldn't be with me. And the other character is like, what?
It doesn't bother me.
That doesn't bother me. Why would I be upset about that? So I think that's where I had a lot of fun with the 2 points of view. Is I have one character who's like my grump, being like, I'm a bit too bad for you. Like that maybe she won't like me if she like knows who I really am. And the other character's like, I really unconditionally like this person. I really wish she would just tell me about herself. And that I had a lot of fun with that kind of stuff.
That does sound like a lot of fun. And is this part of a series, or is it standalone?
This is a standalone. I enjoy a standalone. I love this world. I would love to write more in it, but currently only plans for one book.
Okay, well, I have an idea for you. If everybody loves the book, you can take James and you give him his own love story with a new character. I got that right, James. It was right.
Yes, it was James. I think that is my dream for a second book. I think that James deserves his own story, but if everybody loved it, that's what I would probably do.
Well, and that's really a good way to do standalones in the romance genre. I feel like just, talk about their friends, and then you see a little bit about the first couple, and then you learn more about the other people. So yeah, in my opinion, I like that.
And I'm a big fan of that in the romance genre of, like, these side characters seem to be getting a full scene that's hinting at they have some kind of relationship. And then you're like, that's the couple for the next book, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
My favorite thing.
Definitely. I'm currently reading the whole Virgin River series, so I'm very much into that right now. But yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, because when I'm writing fantasy, I don't read fantasy. I don't know how you play that, but I can't read fantasy when I'm writing it, so I don't want to get all my characters mixed up.
I feel like I end up reading not in my age category. So I end up reading a lot of like adult fantasy or like adult sci-fi fantasy genre stuff when I'm writing. Because it's always doing very different things than what young adult is. It does sometimes mean that I get fixated on some idea that I'm like, I don't know if this works in young adult. But at least it's fun in a way to sort of expand my horizons and be excited about something while not also feeling like I can't. Like it's going to be something very similar to, I don't know, Legend Born or something like that.
Right. And why did you choose fantasy and why did you choose young adult?
Yeah, I have just loved fantasy from the beginning. I was a really voracious reader when I was a kid. And I read all these young adult fantasy books and middle grade fantasy as well. And I just have always been really excited by speculative fiction. When I was a kid, I used to read so much like Diane Wynne Jones and like Tamora Pierce. I was here for young girls with swords and people with magic, and like Howl's Moving Castle, like things like that I really liked. And so I think because I just liked it so much, I wanted to live in those worlds. And I was like, my dream is to live in those worlds. And the best way I can do it is write them myself.
And is this your full-time gig, or do you have another life that you also go out and live every once in a while?
Yeah, I have many lives, in fact. Yeah, I do administrative work. I do arts administrative work. And then I'm also an actor. So I mostly am a theater actor. So you can catch me sometimes on the stages in Boston. But that's also very time consuming. So it's something that I'm not doing all the time because it's very hard I cannot really write a book at the same time as I'm doing a show. All writing comes to a stop when I'm doing a show. So I am not doing tons of shows, but those are my other lives.
I can imagine. I've never met someone who's been a theater actor and an author before. It seems like, I mean, a lot of the authors, I don't know. I'm assuming that most authors I talk to tend to be a little more on the introverted side. And are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Are you obviously you're comfortable on stage? And I know those two things don't always go together. So
I would say I'm fairly extroverted. I can be shy, but if you put me in a situation where I'm comfortable, I'm very extroverted. So I do like to talk. It's funny because one of my dreams is honestly to talk about my books to people who are excited about them. That would be wonderful. But yeah, I really do like people. I also give tours. That's another thing I do. I give historical tours as well here in Boston. So I do enjoy having other careers where I go and talk to people more, because it does sometimes drive me up a wall a little bit.
Sit in your writing cave and not talk to anyone.
Exactly. I'm like, I think I need to talk to a person. And
when I come out, I'm like, and this is what and my husband's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Just go.
Very relatable. Yes, I'm also like,
what world are you living in right now?
And still the one I've been writing in. Yeah, the place I've been for the last 9 hours. I've just come to tell you about it. That's all.
Yeah, that's my happy place, right? And do you have certain themes you like to explore? You talked a little bit about some political theme, not taxes and tariffs, but some interpersonal themes. Do you have other themes that you like to talk about in your writing or?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the more you write, the more you suddenly become aware of what you're interested in because it keeps popping up. I think I'm really interested in like autonomy and family responsibilities, like familial responsibilities. That's kind of a very big theme in this book, particularly because I have just two characters who have these somewhat contentious relationships with their families. The non-magical girl is actually a child influencer, and her parents have been putting her on the internet her entire life. So she is sort of has this situation where she feels beholden to her family and understands that this is how they make all of their money is off of like posting things that happen to her online, but she also doesn't necessarily like it and is in the situation where she has to be really secretive about her own life because whatever she tells them she knows is going to go on the internet. So I think that was very interesting to me. And then I have my other character is supposed to be her family's heir and supposed to, continue her family's legacy and like succeed her grandma as being the head of Boston's witch council, which is essentially their witch government. And she doesn't really want that, but there's a lot of familial pressure for her to not let down the family in doing this. So I feel like that's really interesting to me, and the things that people will do for family, and the things you don't necessarily want to do for family. And that's partially, I think, really interesting to me in the young adult space, because that is the most time you're going to be spending with your family basically ever, unless you continue to live with them, which many people do. But many people also in the US move away and don't live with their family. And I definitely did that. So I think that's why it's one of my favorite things to talk about is like your relationship to your family and how that shapes you. Because it's one of, especially when you're a teen and in the later half of high school, if you leave home after that, it can be some of the like, I don't know, most tense time in terms of your relationship with your family and how that shapes who you are and your awareness of how that shaped who you are. So that's stuff that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, and that's that's very on the cusp of that coming of age type story. And I can see these two characters bonding over that shared angst as well.
Yeah, I think that the big inspiration for this book is that I think I had a lot of relationships, like romantic relationships with people when I was a young adult. And I use that term broadly. It was like a little bit after I was just a teen. With people where they had like very difficult relationships with their family. And so I was fascinated, saddened, but also fascinated by the ways that really can impact your relationship, especially when you live with them. And you're like, oh, this stuff frustrates me about my family, but I literally cannot get any distance from them. So I think those are the themes that I was really interested in. And obviously one of the people is like magic and has her own things going on. So it's like nice to have a more fun lens on it and what's
Right.
with her. And it's not just like, oh, doom and gloom. It's a little bit more like, ooh, is she going to succeed the magical legacy or not? But that's where I was coming from thematically with that.
Fun. And do you have similar themes in your first book?
There's definitely a lot of stuff about family in my first book as well, but her family is very different. And also my main character in my first book, Shay, she has a pretty great relationship with her family. But she is very motivated by these dreams she has of like not letting down her family and becoming financially successful, getting a good job, like going to a good college, those kinds of things, because she's like, my family has done so much for me and I don't want to let them down on that level. So that's, I think, where that theme comes in the first book. So it's very totally different because she has a much better
Yeah.
relationship with her family than either of my characters in my second book do.
Yeah, they have similar situations, but their personalities maybe are sending them different ways, right?
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. And where do you think that or what type of reader is going to be the perfect type of reader for this book?
That's a really good question. I think people who want to have both like the fun, super like fluffy, enjoyable things, and then also people who want to think a little bit on the side of that and kind of be like, oh, that is something that happened to me during that time period or is happening to me right now. It's interesting to think about that, but also like this magic is fun.
Yeah, it lightens, I think, doing that in a fantasy setting, it kind of lightens it, makes it fun, and you can examine things without, I think, like I said before, without it feeling too close and like maybe like a little icky but
Yes.
and weighed down.
Yeah, I think that that's some of the part of a big thing that draws me to writing in speculative, because especially because I've been writing contemporary fantasy, it is set in worlds that like mirror our own or are very similar to our own. So the issues that the characters have are not, it's not high fantasy. They're not necessarily like, I need to go slay this dragon. But so some of their issues are a little bit closer to home, but they also have this like very fun element on the side as well. So I hope that people can have fun and also think a little bit.
Well, it definitely comes through when you talk about the book. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Amazing. Love to hear it.
Yeah. So tell me, do you want to talk about your first book a little more and the characters there?
Yeah, sure. So How to Succeed in Witchcraft is a book. It has magic, it has musical theater, it has magic. It's set in a also contemporary fantasy world. It's about this girl. She's an overachieving witch at a cutthroat high school, and she desperately needs this scholarship that she's been trying to get for several years, and it's getting close to the time to apply for it. But she has to make a very difficult choice between trying to get the scholarship that she desperately needs to go to Magical University, or revealing that there is a teacher who controls the scholarship and is behaves very questionably to witches at the school who want to get the scholarship.
Okay, so yeah, so that's a lot to unpack there too. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you could definitely show a character being able to own her power and, you know, navigate all the different people in that world.
Yes, I think it's very much a book about power and who has it and how it's able to be like enacted on you. It also has like a fun romance on the side as well, because I do like to have like something serious to think about and also something fun so that we don't feel like it's all sad.
Right.
But it's very much about her deciding, Shay, my main character, trying to figure out what she's willing to do for success. And how far she's willing to be pushed, how many of her boundaries are possibly going to be violated in the path. And it's also about, how it can be really difficult to be a young girl and navigate things like that, and how important the community around you is to like keep you safe and really stand behind you if you need it.
That's really neat. Yeah, those are hard things to navigate when you're growing up. I mean, I guess at any age, but deciding where your boundaries are and where your line is, and what can you do in situations like that, and who you go to for help, and who can you trust and who can you not. And those are, yeah, lots of things that come up as we progress through high school and college, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my big things about the book is because it has kind of a dark side to what the themes and the things happening in the book are. And some of it can be it's very hard for me to even read some of these things that are in the book. But I think that what's magical, not pun not intended in this moment, about the book for me is that it's about how community can rally around you, and how like the people that you have in your life are really like protecting and supporting you, or what make you not vulnerable to people trying to take advantage of you.
Oh, neat. Yeah, because really at any stage of my life where I've looked at and had a hard time, where I feel like I got my strength was from my community or my friends. And it took a while for me to learn that I didn't have to do it by myself, because I was very like self-sufficient, A-type personality. I was going to do it and it was going to be fine. And it took me a little while to get that, oh, you can let people help you. Letting people help you doesn't show weakness, and all those type of things. So I think those are really neat themes to explore.
Yeah. And I think everything you just said really describes the main character to a T. That's exactly the kind of person that she is. Very much like, I can make it happen. I just need to work harder. I will arrange everything. I don't need to sleep. I just need to work harder. And that's all that is required for me to achieve the American dream. So that's really what the book is about.
Okay, yes, that describes me my freshman and sophomore year of college to a
Yes.
T.
I think that's why the book is like a love letter to the person that I was in like early college and high school. I'm like, take a nap. Like, don't calm down. Someone can help you. You don't need to do all of this. It's fine.
Okay, oh yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Were any of these characters inspired by you?
I feel like all of my characters, like almost everybody I write is inspired by me. Some of my favorite characters mostly end up being the characters that are not inspired by me at all. I think that when I see it myself in some of the characters, I'm like, okay, whatever about that person. Like, I think I'm great, but it feels a little bit too like patting myself on the back, being like, I love this character who has a little bit of me in them. So I'm always most amused and charmed by people that I don't really see myself in, that I feel are very different than myself. Um, Especially confrontational characters, because I'm not particularly confrontational, so I love a confrontational character in a book. It's like who I want to be as a person. But yeah, I do write a lot of characters that have little bits of me in them. I don't have any character that I would say is like fully me, but I do take like a little shard of my personality and put in a lot of my characters. So there's something in there that I would really relate to. With my first book with Shay, it's a lot of the overachiever stuff and feeling like you really have to be on this in this rat race and like working really hard to succeed. So like that's what that is in conversation with. It's much more in a conversation with an earlier version of myself than I am now, which is why it was a little easier to write this book. I don't think I would have been able to write this book at like 18, definitely not. But I didn't have that kind of analysis on what was going on in my life at that time. I was like, this is just how it is. So that's part of why I wanted to write the book, because I was like, this isn't how it has to be. We can imagine something greater for ourselves. Yeah, and I don't know, with my second book, there's several things in Aoife that I really do relate to. Many things that I don't, but I also really relate to. She's very big people pleaser. And it's very hard for her to like put her foot down about things. And that's something that I really related to. And she has a lot of experiences in her romantic life that are not directly lifted from things that have happened to me, but are things that I really related to and themes that I wanted to talk a little bit about, especially in regards to being mixed race. So that's where her character came from. And that's the stuff that I mostly more related to on that end. She's also quite different from me in many ways, but there were some things that were pulled from that.
Well, it can definitely be a struggle to identify with, if you are mixed race, to identify with where exactly you fit in. And I think that time from maybe eighth grade into college and because from high school and college you have that break too, and you had your people in high school and now you may have different people, and where are your people?
Exactly. No, yeah. I think that my first book was interesting because I wrote this character who specifically on the lens of being mixed race. Shay in my first book is extraordinarily confident in her identity of racially in a way that I was not at that time period. And I really liked that. That was really nice to write down and be like, this girl is just confident. She's like, this is who I am, and other people don't necessarily understand, and it doesn't matter. And it's mostly mildly annoying to me. And I really enjoyed that. I was like, this is very healing for me to write someone who's not similar to me, but is somebody that I would like to be would like to have been much more like when, I was 16 years old. So I enjoyed that because I feel like there are a lot of, not that there's like a million stories about mixed race characters out there, but I have seen more of the narratives where people are like, where do I fit? Like, who am I? What am I doing? So it was very nice to write a character who's like, this is who I am. I'm stressed about many things, and this isn't one of them.
Right. Yeah, your hero character, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I always look at people who just seem like completely comfortable wherever they are in much awe. Like, wow, you mean that's actually a personality type?
Yeah. I am amazed. I'm amazed by it. I'm always like waiting. I'm like, is the curtain gonna fall down? Is this like the Wizard of Oz? Is that real? And then sometimes it is real. And I'm like, wow, incredible.
You had different parents than me. I don't know.
That is, and I'm like, yes, the beginning situation was different. That is how we came to this conclusion.
Well, nature, nurture, who knows? But yeah. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask authors, and you might have answered or touched on some of this, but I like to kind of wrap it up. If someone is reading your book, what is the biggest thing, or maybe a couple of the biggest things that you want them to experience or take away from reading that book? And you can talk about both of them in different ways if you would like.
Okay, great. Great. I think for Spells to Forget Us, I think my big takeaway for it is that I think that romantic relationships and just your relationships in general are better if you feel happy in yourself. I think that that's my big takeaway is that the better that you feel about yourself and your life and everything that you have set up, the like more fulfillment you'll be able to get out of being romantically involved with other people. And it's not necessarily going to go well for you to try and fix your problems by being in a romance with somebody. But it can be, everything can be wonderful and, stars in the eyes and in the skies when you feel like happy in yourself and you can give that to another person.
Oh, that warms me and gives me tingles all at the same time. I'm picturing a Thelma and Louise moment a little bit, but I'll have to read the book and see what happens.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, and then I think that for How to Succeed in Witchcraft, I think the big takeaway for it is the thing I was talking about community and being that it's possible to make it your way through really difficult situations by leaning on the people around you, and that nobody really needs to try and go it alone.
Fun. Okay, so when does your new book come out?
September 17th.
September 17th. Yay, congratulations. And tell us where we can find you and all your books.
Yeah, you can find my books, wherever books are sold. Barnes & Noble, your local indie bookstore would be a great place to get it. Amazon, of course. And then if you are interested in finding me online, you can find me at my website, which is aislinnbrophy.com. And then I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, and my handle in both of those places is Aislinn Brophy author.
Fun. So Aislinn Brophy, thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.